The wheels of the medicine wagon groaned against the frozen ruts as Eliza Whitmore adjusted her wool cloak against the biting Wyoming wind. Dawn had barely broken over the frontier town of Laramie, painting the sky in shades of gray and amber that promised another harsh November day. She checked her supplies one final time: laudanum, carbolic acid, bandages, willow bark, and precious vials of morphine, all carefully packed in the worn leather cases that had accompanied her through 3 years of service as a traveling nurse. "You certain about this, Miss Whitmore?" Old Samuel, the wagon driver, spat tobacco juice into the dirt. His weathered face showed the concern of a man who'd seen too many good people swallowed by the unforgiving wilderness. "Storm's brewing something fierce. Them miners can wait another week." Eliza secured the last trunk with practiced efficiency. "They've been waiting 6 weeks already. Samuel, the letter said fever's taken hold. Without proper medicine, more will die." She climbed onto the wagon seat, her dark blue dress practical rather than fashionable, reinforced with leather at the hem to withstand the rigors of frontier travel. "Besides, we've outrun storms before." Samuel muttered something about stubborn women but clicked his tongue at the mules. The wagon lurched forward, joining a small caravan of 3 other wagons, 2 carrying mining supplies and 1 with provisions. Their armed escort consisted of 4 men, hired guns with hard eyes and harder reputations. Not ideal company, but necessary evil in these parts where law extended only as far as a sheriff's horse could ride in a day. The landscape unfolded before them like a canvas painted in browns and grays. Sagebrush dotted the endless plains, broken only by distant mesas that rose like ancient sentinels against the darkening sky. The grass, once golden in summer, now lay brittle and defeated beneath patches of early snow. Wind howled through the emptiness, carrying with it the scent of approaching winter and something else, that metallic taste that preceded the worst storms. By midday, they'd covered 15 miles. The gold camp at Devil's Creek still lay 2 days ahead, nestled in the foothills where desperate men clawed wealth from reluctant earth. Eliza had made this journey twice before, each time returning with stories that would haunt her quiet moments. Men dying of infections that simple cleanliness could prevent, children born in tents with dirt floors, women aged beyond their years, following husbands into a dream that more often became nightmare. "How'd a proper lady like you end up out here?" Jake Morrison, one of the hired guns, had ridden alongside her wagon. His eyes held that calculating look she'd learned to recognize, measuring her worth not as a healer but as a woman alone in a harsh world. "The same way anyone ends up anywhere, Mr. Morrison, one choice at a time." She kept her voice neutral, professional. The small derringer hidden in her medical bag was loaded, though she prayed never to use it. The truth was more complex. After the war, after watching her brother die of wounds that proper medical care could have prevented, she'd trained under Dr. Mary Walker, one of the few female physicians willing to take on students. But female doctors were oddities, unwelcome in proper hospitals. The frontier, however, cared less about propriety than competence. Out here, if you could stop bleeding and ease pain, nobody questioned your right to do so. The first snowflakes began falling as they reached Skeleton Ridge, so named for the bleached bones of cattle that had perished in a blizzard 3 winters past. The wind picked up, driving ice crystals horizontal across the barren landscape. Samuel hunched lower on his seat, occasionally cursing the mules when they balked at the worsening conditions. "We should make camp," shouted Tom Brennan, the caravan leader, over the growing howl. "There's a sheltered spot about a mile ahead." But they never reached it. The attack came with practiced precision. Riders emerged from a draw they'd passed moments before, 8 men with faces wrapped against the cold, leaving only eyes that glinted with predatory intent. Gunfire erupted, sharp cracks that echoed off the ridge. One of the guards toppled from his horse immediately, red spreading across fresh snow. "Get down!" Samuel shoved Eliza to the wagon bed as bullets splintered the wooden sides. She heard him grunt, saw him slump forward, reins falling from slack fingers. The mules, panicked by the shooting, bolted forward, the wagon careening wildly. Through the chaos, she glimpsed the other wagons under attack. The supply wagon overturned, spilling crates that burst open on impact. Men shouted, horses screamed, and above it all, the storm intensified as if nature itself had joined the assault. The runaway wagon hit a hidden rock, sending Eliza tumbling into the snow. Pain shot through her shoulder as she struck the frozen ground. Dazed, she struggled to her knees, watching helplessly as the bandits efficiently looted the caravan. They worked fast, knowing the storm would cover their tracks within hours. One rider noticed her movement. He trotted over, rifle casual across his saddle. Well, the nurse." His voice held a disturbing amusement. "Boy said to leave you, can't sell damaged goods." He leaned down, and she saw his face clearly despite the wrapping scarred, with pale eyes that held no mercy. "But then again, who's gonna find you out here?" He raised his rifle butt. The blow sent her into darkness. Consciousness returned slowly, bringing with it cold that seemed to reach into her very bones. Snow covered her partially, a white shroud that might have become permanent had she slept much longer. The caravan was gone. Bodies lay scattered. She recognized two of the guards. Samuel's still form slumped over the wagon seat 50 yards away where the mules had finally stopped. Blood had frozen on her temple where the rifle struck. Her medical bag lay nearby, contents scattered but salvageable. With numb fingers, she gathered what she could. Bandages, a small amount of laudanum, her surgical instruments. The Derringer was gone, likely taken with anything else of obvious value. Standing proved difficult. Her ankle, twisted in the fall, protested each step. The storm had worsened, visibility dropping to mere yards. She needed shelter, warmth, anything to survive the night. But which direction? The ridge offered some protection, but without tools or strength to dig a proper shelter, it would become her tomb. She thought of her patients waiting at Devil's Creek, of promises made to desperate families, of her brother's voice, weak but determined. "Don't let it be for nothing. Lizzie, make it count." Using a broken wagon spoke as a crutch, she began walking. Direction mattered less than movement. Stop moving and the cold would claim her as surely as any bullet. The wind tore at her cloak, finding every gap in her clothing. Snow blinded her. Each step a struggle against forces that seemed determined to erase her from this harsh landscape. Time lost meaning. She might have walked an hour or 3. Her world narrowed to the next step, the next breath. Ice formed on her eyelashes. Her lips cracked and bled. The medical knowledge that had saved so many now cataloged her body's systematic shutdown. Hypothermia, frostbite, shock. A rock formation loomed suddenly from the white void. Not true shelter, but perhaps enough to block the worst of the wind. She collapsed behind it, pulling her knees to her chest, trying to preserve what little warmth remained. Her thoughts drifted. Dangerous sign, though she recognized it. She'd left no family back east. No sweetheart waiting for letters that would never come. Just patients who needed her, who would wonder why the medicine never arrived. The frontier would swallow her like it had swallowed so many others, leaving no trace but another cautionary tale told around campfires. But not yet, not while breath remained. With stiff fingers, she opened her medical bag and found the small flask of whiskey kept for medicinal purposes. The liquid burned, bringing momentary warmth. She forced herself to eat the hardtack biscuits in her pocket, knowing she needed energy to survive. Wrapping every available piece of cloth around herself, she prepared to endure the night. The storm raged on, indifferent to her struggle. Somewhere out there, the bandits counted their take, warm and safe in whatever hole they called home. Somewhere, patients waited for help that might never come. And here, in this small pocket of relative calm, carved from merciless nature, Eliza Whitmore fought her own battle, not against fever or infection, but against the frontier itself. She would not die quietly. If the wilderness wanted her life, it would have to take it one stubborn breath at a time. Tomorrow, if tomorrow came, she would continue, find help, find warmth, find a way to keep her promise. The traveling nurse had been left to die. But Eliza Whitmore had not survived 3 years on the frontier by surrendering easily. As darkness deepened and snow continued to fall, she closed her eyes and began the long wait for dawn, whispering prayers to a God who seemed very far from this desolate place. The wolf tracks were fresh, maybe 3 hours old, pressed deep into the snow despite the storm's attempt to erase them. Jonah Reed crouched beside the prince, reading the story they told, a small pack, 4 or 5 adults, moving with purpose toward the ridge. Hunting. In weather like this, they'd be desperate, dangerous. He'd been tracking them for 2 days, hired by a rancher who'd lost cattle to the pack. Good money for a wolf pelt, better money for several. But something else caught his eye, marks that didn't belong. Wagon ruts, already half filled with snow. Boot prints, staggering, uneven. Blood frozen dark against white. Jonah straightened, ice cracking on his buffalo coat. At 35, he'd spent half his life reading sign, following trails others couldn't see. The war had taught him that skill, honed it sharp as the Bowie knife at his belt. After Antietam, after watching his unit dissolve in cannon smoke and screams, he'd headed west where a man's past mattered less than his ability to survive. The tracks told him someone was in trouble. Not his business. Technically, he had wolves to find, pelts to collect, but the boot prints were small. A woman or young boy, injured, alone in this killing cold. He whistled low to his horse, a hardy Mustang named Sage who'd carried him through worse storms than this. The animal responded immediately, trained to come at that particular sound. Jonah swung into the saddle. Decision made. The wolves could wait. Death had claimed enough today without his help. Following the tracks proved challenging. The storm had worsened, wind driving snow horizontal across the landscape. But Jonah had learned patience from the Shoshone, learned to see what others missed. A broken sage branch here, a scrape against rock there. Whoever had passed this way was weakening, steps growing shorter, falls more frequent. He found the massacre site first, bodies scattered like broken dolls, already partially buried. His practiced eye cataloged the scene, ambush, professional, quick. The kind of work done by men who knew their business and felt no guilt about it. He'd seen similar scenes before, would likely see them again. The frontier bred hard men, and law was often just a word in towns too far away to matter. One body caught his attention. An older man slumped in a wagon seat, reins still wrapped around his fingers. A driver. Then, which meant passengers. Jonah examined the wagon bed, found medical supplies scattered in the snow. Glass vials, bandages, instruments he couldn't name but recognized as doctoring tools. The traveling nurse was left to die, he muttered, piecing together the story. He'd heard talk in Laramie about a woman healer heading to the mining camps, brave or foolish, depending on who told it. Now it seemed she was likely dead. Another victim of the frontier's harsh arithmetic, but the tracks said otherwise. One set led away from the massacre, stumbling but determined. She'd survived the initial attack, walked into the storm rather than freeze among the dead. Tough woman. Most would have given up, curled into the snow and waited for the end. He followed her trail, noting how she'd used a wagon spoke as a crutch, how she'd stopped to rest against rocks, always choosing spots that offered some protection from the wind. Smart, too, but smart only went so far against a Wyoming blizzard. The pine forest started gradually, scattered trees becoming denser as the land rose toward the mountains. The tracks led him into the timber, where snow-weighted branches created a cathedral of white silence. Here the wind died to a whisper, though cold still bit deep. Movement caught his eye. Not wolves. He'd have sensed them sooner. Something huddled against a massive pine, so still it might have been a snow-covered log except for the slight rise and fall that spoke of labored breathing. Jonah dismounted, approached carefully. Experience had taught him that injured creatures, human or otherwise, could react unpredictably. The figure didn't move as he knelt beside it, brushing away snow to reveal a woman's face, lips blue with cold, frost painting her eyelashes white. She was unconscious, but alive, barely. Her skin held that waxy look that preceded death by freezing. Blood had frozen on her temple, dark against pale skin. He checked her limbs, found her ankles swollen beneath her boot, fingers showing early signs of frostbite. No time for gentleness. He lifted her, surprised by how light she felt even with waterlogged clothes. Her head lolled against his shoulder. No sign of consciousness as he carried her to Sage. The horse stood steady as Jonah draped her across the saddle, then mounted behind her, holding her secure against his chest. His hunting cabin lay 2 miles north, built in a sheltered canyon where he'd wintered 3 years running. Not fancy, but solid, with a stone fireplace and walls thick enough to block the worst weather. He urged Sage forward, feeling the woman's shallow breathing against his chest, willing her to hold on just a little longer. The canyon mouth appeared through the snow like a gateway to sanctuary. Here, high walls blocked the wind, creating a pocket of relative calm. The cabin sat against the north wall, nearly invisible beneath snow-covered pine boughs he'd laid across the roof for insulation. Inside was dark, cold as a tomb. Jonah laid the woman on his bed, buffalo robes piled on a rope frame, then set about making fire. Kindling caught quickly. Flames growing to eat the larger logs, he fed them. Warmth spread slowly, pushing back the cold that had claimed the space. By firelight, he could see her properly, younger than he'd expected. Maybe late 20s, with dark hair coming loose from practical pins. Her dress was good wool, serviceable rather than decorative. Speaking of someone who valued function over fashion, the medical bag still clutched in her frozen fingers confirmed his guess. This was indeed the traveling nurse from Laramie. He'd seen men die from cold, knew the danger of warming too quickly. Instead, he worked methodically. First, the wet outer clothes had to go. He cut them away with his knife, maintaining what modesty he could while prioritizing survival. Wool blankets replaced wet fabric, layered carefully to trap warmth. Her boots proved difficult, the swollen ankle making removal painful, even in unconsciousness. She moaned, the first sound she'd made, as he finally worked the boot free. The ankle was bad, possibly broken, certainly sprained. He'd set bones before, but without her awake to tell him where the pain centered, he could only wrap it carefully and hope. The head wound needed cleaning. He heated water, added salt from his supplies, cleaned away blood and dirt with surprising gentleness for hands more used to skinning game than tending wounds. The cut wasn't deep, though the bruising suggested she'd taken a hard blow. Rifle butt, most likely, the bandit's calling card. He worked through the night, maintaining the fire, checking her breathing, slowly raising her core temperature. Her fingers worried him most. 2 showed the white, waxy look of deep frostbite. He immersed them in lukewarm water, knowing the pain would be excruciating when feeling returned. Dawn came gray and subdued. Storm still raging beyond the canyon walls. The woman hadn't regained consciousness, but her breathing had steadied, color returning slowly to her cheeks. Jonah made coffee, the familiar ritual grounding him after the long vigil. He'd done what he could. The rest lay in hands other than his. Some pulled through exposure like this. Some didn't. The strong survived. The weak perished. Frontier law, simple and merciless. But watching her face in the firelight, seeing the determination even in unconsciousness, jaw set, brows drawn together as if fighting even in sleep, he found himself hoping she was among the strong. Too many good people fed the frontier's appetite. Let this one live. Let her heal and return to those who needed her skills. He'd sheltered here alone for weeks at a time, content with silence and his own company. But something about this woman's presence changed the cabin's feeling. Her medical bag, which he'd examined while she slept, contained instruments of healing rather than harm, books with careful notes in feminine handwriting, letters from grateful patients, tools of someone who fought death rather than dealt it. Outside, wind howled through the pines like a living thing, angry at being cheated of its prey. Inside, warmth and light held winter at bay. Jonah settled into his chair, rifle across his knees out of habit more than real concern, and maintained his watch. She would live or die by her own strength now. He'd given her the chance. That was more than the frontier usually offered, more than he'd received when he'd needed it. But then, he'd never expected mercy, never sought it. The traveling nurse had been left to die. But sometimes, just sometimes, the frontier's arithmetic came out different than expected. Sometimes someone was there to tip the scales. Jonah Reed, tracker, hunter, man who'd chosen solitude over society, sat beside the bed and waited to see which way those scales would tip. Consciousness returned like a tide, bringing pain with each wave. Eliza's eyes opened to unfamiliar shadows dancing on rough-hewn walls. Firelight, warmth, the astringent smell of burning pine. For a moment, she wondered if this was death. Surely hell would be cold, not this blessed heat seeping into her bones. Memory crashed back. The attack, snow, walking until her body betrayed her. Then, nothing. She tried to sit up, gasped as pain shot through her ankle and shoulder. Strong hands pressed her back down, gentle but firm. Easy there. The voice was deep, graveled like creek stones worn smooth. You've been 3 days fighting your way back. Don't undo that work now. 3 days? Eliza focused on the speaker, finding a face that matched the voice. Weathered, bearded, with gray eyes that held the watchful stillness of wild things. Not handsome in the conventional sense, but striking in the way weathered granite could be striking. All harsh planes and unforgiving angles softened only by firelight. Where? Her voice came out as a croak. Her throat felt like she'd swallowed sand. He helped her drink from a tin cup, water flavored with pine needles and something medicinal, willow bark. She recognized, my cabin, about 15 miles from where I found you. Storm still blowing, but we're safe enough here. Safe. The word felt foreign after what she'd endured. The others, Samuel, dead. He didn't soften it, didn't try to cushion the blow. Found the massacre site. You were the only one who walked away. Eliza closed her eyes, grief settling heavy. Samuel had been a good man, gruff but kind. The guards, for all their rough ways, had family somewhere. All gone for what? Gold meant for purchasing supplies? Horses? Senseless waste. My medical bag? Here. He indicated the corner where her supplies sat, carefully arranged. Saved what I could. Used some of your own medicines on you. Hope that's acceptable. She studied him more carefully. His clothes were practical. Buckskins and wool. Everything mended with careful stitches. A rifle leaned against the wall within easy reach. Knife at his belt. But his hands, now adding wood to the fire, moved with surprising delicacy. These were hands that could deal death or preservation with equal skill. You're the tracker. Jonah Reed. Recognition came slowly. She'd heard his name in Laramie, usually followed by warnings. A man who lived outside society's boundaries, who could find anything or anyone for the right price. Some called him hero, some killer. Most just called him dangerous. He glanced at her, one eyebrow raised. My reputation precedes me. I've sewn up men you've brought in, both bounties and those he'd rescued. The frontier made strange bedfellows of law and lawlessness. And now I'm returning the favor. It seems. He stirred something in a pot over the fire. The smell made her stomach clench with hunger. Though I'll admit, my needlework's not as pretty as yours. Despite everything, she almost smiled. I'm Eliza Whitmore. I know. Found your papers. He ladled what looked like rabbit stew into a bowl. Can you sit up? You need to eat. With his help, she managed to prop herself against the wall, blankets pulled high. Only then did she realize she wore nothing but her chemise beneath. Heat flooded her cheeks. Your clothes were soaked through, he said matter-of-factly, not meeting her eyes. Hypothermia would have killed you faster than modesty. There's a shirt of mine you can wear when you're steadier. The practicality in his tone eased her embarrassment. This was survival. Nothing more. She accepted the bowl, surprised to find her hand steady enough to hold it. The stew was simple. Rabbit, wild onions, some root vegetables she couldn't identify, but it tasted like ambrosia. Thank you. The words seemed inadequate for what he'd done. I owe you my life. He shrugged, uncomfortable with gratitude. Would have done the same for anyone. But would anyone have done the same for her? Eliza doubted it. Most would have ridden past, especially with a storm threatening. This man had chosen to follow her tracks, chosen to carry her to shelter, chosen to spend 3 days nursing her back from death's edge. They sat in surprisingly comfortable silence while she ate. The storm's howl provided constant background noise, reminding her how close death still waited. Her medical training cataloged her injuries with clinical detachment, sprained ankle, possible concussion, frostbite damage to 2 fingers that might never fully heal. But she was alive. Against all odds, alive. The men who attacked us, she said finally. Will they come looking? Jonah shook his head. Storm covered their tracks same as yours. Besides, they think you're dead. No profit in checking. There are people waiting for me at Devil's Creek. Sick people. Not in this weather. They're not. His tone was flat, final. That pass has been closed for a week. Will stay closed until spring thaw. Your patients will have to make do. Despair washed over her. All those miles, all that suffering. And she'd failed. The medicine in her bag might as well be back in Laramie for all the good it would do. Don't! His voice cut through her spiral. You did what you could. No one could ask more. You don't understand. I promised. I understand promises. Something dark moved behind his eyes. I understand failure. But I also understand that dying for strangers who'd forget your name within a season is fool's courage. Anger flared, hot and sudden. And what would you have me do? Hide in towns where people are safe, where help comes easy. Most would. I'm not most. He studied her then, really looked at her for the first time since she'd woken. No, he said finally. I suppose you're not. The next days passed in a routine that felt strangely domestic. Jonah tended his trap lines in the mornings, returning with rabbit or sometimes venison. Eliza managed to hobble around the cabin, organizing her medical supplies, reading the few books he owned, mostly treatises on tracking and a worn Bible that looked unopened in years. They talked in the evenings, conversations that started cautiously but gradually deepened. She learned he'd been a scout in the war, had seen things that drove him west seeking silence. He learned about her brother, about the helplessness of watching him die, about choosing medicine in a world that said proper women didn't touch bodies or speak of blood. Why live out here alone? She asked one night. The storm had finally broken, leaving crystal silence in its wake. He was oiling his rifle. Movements, automatic. People are complicated. Animals, weather, the land, they're honest. They'll kill you, but they won't lie about it first. That's cynical. That's experience. But she noticed how carefully he'd tended her injuries, how he always announced himself before entering the cabin, giving her time to arrange clothing and dignity. For a man who claimed to distrust humanity, he showed remarkable consideration. Her ankle healed slowly. Jonah fashioned a crutch from pine, wrapped her foot in supportive leather. She practiced walking, determined to regain strength. He watched these efforts with something like approval, occasionally offering steadying hands when she stumbled. You could stay, he said one evening, apropos of nothing. They'd been discussing the best route back to Laramie when weather permitted. Cabin's small, but there's room. I could use someone who knows healing. The offer hung between them, loaded with possibilities neither quite dared examine. Stay. Give up her traveling, her purpose, her promises. Become what? His woman, his partner. The frontier was full of such arrangements, born of loneliness and necessity. I can't. The words hurt to say. There are people who need, there always will be. His voice held no judgment, only resignation. That's the hell of it. Save one, 10 more need saving. Heal one, 20 more fall sick. When does it end? It doesn't. That's why I have to keep trying. He nodded, returning to his rifle. The subject didn't arise again, but awareness stretched between them now, delicate as frost on window glass. She caught him watching her sometimes, something unreadable in those storm-gray eyes. caught herself watching him, noting the grace in his movements, the gentle way he handled her injured ankle. The day finally came when she could walk without the crutch. A small victory, but she felt like celebrating. Jonah had been gone since dawn, checking distant traps. She decided to surprise him with a proper meal using the venison he'd smoked and herbs she'd identified around the cabin. She was seasoning the meat when hoofbeats sounded outside. Too early for Jonah. The sun hadn't reached midday. Her hand went automatically to where her derringer should be. Finding only empty air, the door opened without warning. A man stood silhouetted against snow glare, not Jonah's lean height but broader, wearing town clothes poorly suited to the wilderness. Well. The voice sent ice down her spine. She recognized those pale eyes, that scarred face, the bandit who'd struck her down. The nurse lives after all? Boys owe me $5. He stepped inside, closing the door with deliberate slowness. Funny thing, finding Reed's horse tracks leading here, figured he'd found himself a wolf to skin. Never imagined he'd gone soft, playing nursemaid. He'll be back soon. Her voice stayed steady though her heart hammered. Oh, I'm counting on it. His smile held nothing of warmth. See, Reed cost me a partner last year. Been waiting for a chance to settle that score, and here you are, gift wrapped. She backed toward the corner where Jonah kept the rifle. The man laughed, drew his pistol with lazy confidence. Now, none of that. You're going to sit quiet while we wait for your savior. Then we'll see how much he values that pretty neck of yours. The door exploded open. Jonah stood there, rifle leveled, eyes gone cold as winter stone. Let her go. Garrett. Reed. The bandit kept his pistol aimed at Eliza. Been a while. You're looking domesticated. This what you're doing now? Collecting strays? I said let her go. This is between us. Everything's between us since you put that bullet in Jake. Garrett's voice hardened. But sure, I'll make you a deal. Drop the rifle. Let me put one in your knee to even the score, and the lady walks free. Eliza saw Jonah's jaw tighten, saw him calculating odds, distances, chances, saw him start to lower the rifle. No! She grabbed the pot from the stove, flung the hot contents at Garrett. He screamed, pistol firing wild as he clawed at his face. Jonah moved, fast as thought, rifle butt crashing down. Garrett crumpled. Blood seeped into rough floorboards, mixing with spilled stew. Eliza stared at the scene, adrenaline making her hands shake. She'd taken an oath to do no harm, had just broken it without hesitation. Jonah checked Garrett's pulse, nodded grimly. Alive. Won't be happy when he wakes, though. He looked at her, something new in his expression. That was quick thinking. He would have killed you even if you'd surrendered. Yes. Simple agreement. No pretense that violence could be negotiated with words. You understand that world's full of men like him. And men like you. The question slipped out before she could stop it. He was quiet for a long moment. Sometimes there's not much difference. Except I try to choose my targets better. They bound Garrett, loaded him on his horse. Jonah would take him to the nearest town. Let law sort out the rest. But first he turned to her, standing in the doorway of the cabin that had been sanctuary and was now tainted with violence. Offer stands, he said quietly. If you want it. Eliza looked at him, this dangerous, gentle man who'd saved her life and whose life she'd just saved in return. Looked at the cabin where she'd healed and discovered something beyond mere survival. Looked at the vast wilderness stretching endlessly, full of people needing help and men willing to hurt. I need to think, she said. He nodded, understanding more than she'd said. I'll be back in 3 days. Whatever you decide, I'll help you do it. Then he was gone, riding into white distance with unconscious evil draped over a spare horse. Eliza stood in the doorway until cold drove her inside. 3 days to choose between the life she'd built and something unknown but no longer unimaginable. The fire crackled, shadows danced, and silence settled over the cabin like snow. But it was a different silence now, one full of possibility rather than mere survival. She'd been left to die and found life instead. Found strength she hadn't known she possessed. And perhaps, just perhaps, found something worth staying for. The morning Jonah returned, Eliza had her answer packed in leather saddlebags alongside her medical supplies. He found her dressed in the men's clothing he'd left for her. Practical wool trousers, thick shirt, her own cloak mended with his careful stitches. Her hair was pinned severely back, jaws set with determination. "I need to go back," she said before he could speak. "Not to Laramie, to Devil's Creek. Those people still need help, and I have medicine." He studied her from the doorway, snow still dusting his shoulders. "Pass is still treacherous. Won't be a pleasure ride." "I'm not looking for pleasure. I'm looking to keep my word." Something shifted in his expression. Disappointment quickly masked. "Then we'd better get moving. Weather's holding, but that won't last. The simple pronoun caught her off guard. "You don't have to." "Yes, I do." He moved past her to gather supplies. "You think I'd let you face those mountain passes alone, after what happened last time? I'm not your responsibility." He paused, hands full of ammunition and dried meat. "No, you're not." The words held weight beyond their simplicity. "But I'm going anyway." They left within the hour. Eliza on a sturdy mountain pony Jonah had acquired during his trip to town. He'd dealt with Garrett, though he shared few details beyond justice was served. She didn't press. Some stories were better left untold. The route he chose avoided the main trail where she'd been ambushed. Instead, they wound through hidden valleys and game paths, ways known only to those who made the wilderness their home. The first day passed in relative ease, following a frozen creek bed between towering pines. "How long have you lived out here?" she asked as they made camp that evening. 7 years, give or take." He built their fire with economical movements, creating a small blaze that gave heat without too much smoke. Came out after the war, kept moving west until the noise stopped. The noise? In my head, guns, screaming, orders that sent good men to die for bad reasons. He handed her coffee, black and bitter. "Took 3 years before I could sleep without seeing faces." Eliza understood. She'd treated enough soldiers to recognize the wounds that didn't show. "Does it ever fully stop?" "No, but it gets quieter, especially out here where the only sounds are real ones." They sat in companionable silence, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. The temperature dropped rapidly once the sun disappeared, and she found herself grateful for the extra blankets he'd packed. "Tell me about Devil's Creek," he said eventually. "What draws you back there?" "A promise." She explained about the letter that had reached her in Laramie, written in a child's careful hand. Her father was sick. Others too. They'd collected money for medicine. Would she come? "How could I refuse? That little girl believes I can save her father." "Maybe you can't. Maybe he's already dead." "Maybe, but I have to try." He nodded, understanding what drove her even if he didn't share it. That was the thing about Jonah. He didn't try to change her mind or protect her from harsh truths. He simply accepted her choices and offered support. The second day brought challenges. The path climbed steeply, winding through narrow defiles where snow had drifted deep. Twice they had to dismount and lead the horses through sections where ice made footing treacherous. Eliza's ankle, still weak, protested the effort. Here, Jonah appeared at her side during one particularly difficult stretch, offering his arm. She took it without pride interfering, leaning into his solid strength as they navigated a sheet of ice covering the trail. Halfway through, her foot slipped. For a heart-stopping moment, she felt herself falling toward the drop hundreds of feet down to jagged rocks. Then Jonah's arm locked around her waist, hauling her against him, holding steady until she found balance. "I've got you." His breath warmed her ear, body heat seeping through layers of clothing. They stood frozen for a moment, pressed together by necessity and something more. Then he stepped back, professional once more. "Take your time, no rush." But her heart rushed anyway, beating fast for reasons that had nothing to do with near disaster. She felt the phantom pressure of his arm long after they'd passed the dangerous section. Camp that night was a shallow cave he'd used before, providing shelter from wind that had picked up throughout the day. They huddled close to the fire, sharing heat and rations. Outside, snow began to fall again. "Storm coming," he observed, reading signs she couldn't see. "We'll need to move fast tomorrow. Will we make it through?" "If we're lucky." He paused, then added with rare humor, "Course, luck hasn't been your strong suit lately." "I found you, didn't I?" The words slipped out before thought could censor them. He looked at her across the fire, something unguarded flickering in his eyes. "That you did." Morning brought the storm's full fury. Wind howled through the pass like a living thing, driving snow horizontal. Visibility dropped to mere feet. Jonah tied a rope between their horses, ensuring they wouldn't separate. "Stay close," he shouted over the gale. "Trust your horse. They know these paths better than we do." What followed was hours of numbing cold and blind faith. Eliza hunched low in the saddle, following the dark shape of Jonah ahead, trusting he knew where to lead. Ice formed on her eyelashes, her scarf. Her world narrowed to the rhythm of hoofbeats and the rope stretching taut between them. Then disaster. A crack like gunshot snow shelf breaking. Jonah's horse screamed, thrashing as the trail crumbled beneath its hooves. Eliza watched in horror as man and mount slid sideways toward the edge. Instinct took over. She kicked her pony forward, grabbed the rope with both hands, wrapping it around her saddle horn. The sudden weight nearly pulled her over too, but her mount, bless its stubborn heart, dug in and held. "The knife!" Jonah shouted. He dangled over the edge, one hand on the rope, the other controlling his panicked horse. Cut the horse loose. Cut the rope meant losing the horse and possibly Jonah too if her grip failed. But she saw the inevitable. The combined weight would pull them all over. She drew the knife from her belt, urged her pony closer to solid ground, then slashed the rope behind Jonah. His horse fell away into white nothing. But he held on, and her pony, lighter now, managed to back away from the crumbling edge. Eliza dismounted, grabbed the rope, added her strength to the horses, inch by inch. They hauled him up until he collapsed on solid trail. They lay gasping in the snow, storm raging around them. When he could speak, Jonah gripped her shoulder. "You saved my life." "Returning the favor," she managed through chattering teeth. He laughed, wild and unexpected. "We're even then." They couldn't stay exposed. His supplies had gone with the horse, but hers remained. They pressed on, sharing her mount, his body sheltering hers from the worst of the wind. By some miracle, they found the shelter he'd aimed for, a trapper's cabin, abandoned but intact. Inside was dusty but dry. Jonah built a fire while Eliza inventoried their supplies. Limited food, basic medical supplies, ammunition. Enough to survive if the storm didn't last too long. "Your hands." He'd noticed her struggling with the fire steel. The rope had torn through her gloves, leaving raw burns across both palms. "I'll manage." "No." He took her hands in his, examining the damage with surprising gentleness. "Let me." He cleaned the wounds with snowmelt, applied salve from her supplies, wrapped them carefully. His touch was clinical but tender, focused entirely on the task. She watched his face, seeing concentration that probably appeared when tracking game or reading sign. "There," he tied off the last bandage. "Try to keep them dry." "Jonah." She waited until he met her eyes. "Thank you, for everything, for coming with me, for—" "Don't." But his voice was gentle. "We're not to Devil's Creek yet." The storm raged for 2 days. They passed time telling stories, sharing memories, learning each other's rhythms. He taught her to read weather sign. She showed him field surgery techniques. They talked about everything except the awareness growing between them, thick as smoke in the small cabin. On the 3rd morning, silence. The storm had passed, leaving the world transformed in pristine white. They emerged to find the trail ahead clear, Devil's Creek visible in the valley below. "We made it." Eliza couldn't quite believe it. "You made it," he corrected. I just came along for the ride." They descended carefully, aware that salvation and separation waited below. The mining camp appeared gradually. Rough buildings, smoke rising from chimneys, signs of life that seemed foreign after their mountain isolation. People emerged as they approached, recognition dawning. "It's the nurse. Miss Whitmore made it through." Then chaos hands reaching to help her down, voices explaining who was sick, who died waiting, who still had hope. She let herself be swept along, medical instincts taking over. But she looked back once to find Jonah standing apart, holding the pony's reins, watching her disappear into her world of need and healing. When she finally broke free hours later, he was gone. Only a note waited in her medical bag. "When you're ready to stop running toward death, you know where to find life." J. Eliza held the paper, remembering strong arms pulling her from the edge, gentle hands tending her wounds, gray eyes that saw too much and asked too little. Around her, Devil's Creek bustled with the business of survival. She had work here, important work, but for the first time since she'd taken up her calling, she wondered if work was enough, if promises to strangers could fill the space where something else might grow, if a cabin in a canyon could offer its own kind of healing. She folded the note carefully, placed it with her most precious supplies. Then she turned back to her patients, carrying new knowledge alongside her medicines. She understood now what it meant to be pulled back from the edge, understood what hands reaching out in darkness could mean, and perhaps, when this work was done, she'd understand what it meant to reach back. 3 weeks had passed since Jonah left her at Devil's Creek. 3 weeks of fighting fever, setting bones, and watching too many miners slip beyond her help. Eliza had saved the little girl's father, barely, but lost 2 others to pneumonia that medicine reached too late. Such was the arithmetic of frontier healing. Some victories, more defeats, and the weight of both on her shoulders. Now she stood at the edge of Millfield, a small town 2 days' ride from the mining camp, where she'd come to replenish supplies. The place buzzed with the peculiar energy of a settlement trying to become respectable. Wooden sidewalks replacing mud paths, a church steeple rising beside the saloons, women in proper dresses eyeing her travel-worn appearance with undisguised curiosity. "Miss Whitmore?" A woman approached, middle-aged, with the bearing of someone used to organizing others. "I'm Mrs. Catherine Hartwell, president of the Millfield Ladies' Temperance Society. We heard about your work at Devil's Creek." Eliza nodded, wary of where this might lead. Town women often had opinions about females who traveled alone, who touched bodies and spoke of things proper ladies ignored. "We'd like to offer you lodging while you're here," Mrs. Hartwell continued, surprising her. "And perhaps you might speak to our young women about the importance of medical knowledge. Many will be heading to homesteads soon, far from doctors." The offer was kindly meant, but Eliza recognized the underlying message. Come into the fold. Be respectable. Stop wandering like some wild creature. She accepted the lodging. A clean bed appealed after weeks of camp cots, but made no promises about staying longer. The Hartwell house was everything Jonah's cabin wasn't. Doilies on every surface, china that matched, portraits of stern ancestors watching from papered walls. Eliza bathed in a copper tub, donned a borrowed dress that felt like costume after weeks in men's clothing, and joined the family for dinner. You must have seen such terrible things. Mrs. Hartwell's daughter, Rose, breathed with the fascination of someone who'd never faced real hardship. "Weren't you terrified?" "Sometimes," Eliza admitted, "but fear passes, need remains." Still, Mr. Hartwell, a banker with soft hands and hard eyes, interjected, "Surely a woman of your education could find more suitable employment. The new school needs a teacher, respectable work, steady pay, no danger. Children need teaching." Eliza agreed, but injured men need healing more urgently. Men who put themselves in harm's way, mining for gold that likely doesn't exist. His tone suggested such men deserved their fate. "Hardly worthy of a lady's sacrifice. Every life is worthy of saving. Mr. Hartwell. Even outlaws. We heard you were found by that tracker. Read." Mrs. Hartwell's voice dropped as if speaking of something shameful. "A dangerous man. Killed 3 men last spring. 3 men who were terrorizing homesteaders," Eliza said evenly. "And he saved my life. I'd be frozen bones without his intervention." Still, Mrs. Hartwell exchanged glances with her husband. People talk, a young woman alone with such a man for weeks. And there it was, the real reason for this hospitality, not kindness but curiosity, and beneath that, judgment. She'd been marked by her time in the wilderness, by association with a man who lived outside their neat boundaries. "I was injured and unconscious most of that time," Eliza said, knowing it wouldn't matter. The story was too delicious. The proper nurse and the dangerous tracker. Truth was less interesting than speculation. That night, lying in the too-soft bed, she thought about Jonah's cabin. No judgment there, no whispers behind hands. Just honest shelter and silence that didn't press for explanations. She'd felt more respectable caring for her wounds by firelight than she did in this house of propriety. Morning brought new challenges. Word had spread of her presence, and a line of people waited outside, men sheepish about seeking help, women with children whose coughs wouldn't cease, elderly folks with joints that predicted weather. She set up an impromptu clinic in the church, working through the day. "That's quite a skill," a familiar voice observed. Eliza looked up from bandaging a boy's cut knee to find a man she recognized from Laramie doctor, Marcus Thornton, one of the few university-trained physicians who'd ventured west, well-dressed, handsome in the way that spoke of regular meals and soft living. "Dr. Thornton," she finished with the boy, sending him off with a penny sweet from her pocket. "What brings you to Millfield?" "Setting up practice. The town's growing. Needs proper medical care." He surveyed her makeshift clinic with professional interest. "You do good work for someone without formal training. I trained under Dr. Mary Walker." "Ah, yes, the dress reformer." His tone held subtle dismissal. "Still, field experience only goes so far. Have you considered formal schooling? I have connections back east. Who would treat these people while I spent years in classrooms learning what I already know? I would, of course, properly, with real medicines and modern techniques. For those who can afford your fees." His smile tightened. "Medicine is a profession, Miss Whitmore, not a charity." She thought of all the payments she'd received, chickens, mended clothes, IOUs that would never be collected. Thought of children alive because she'd traded medicine for eggs. "Perhaps that's where we differ, Doctor." But his words lingered. Was she playing at medicine? As he implied, did her practical knowledge fall short of real training? The doubts followed her through the afternoon, whispering with each patient she treated. Evening brought escape. She left the Hartwell house on pretense of checking on a patient, but really just to walk, to think. The town felt constraining after weeks in open country. Even the sky seemed smaller here, hemmed by buildings and expectations. She found herself at the livery stable, checking on the horse she'd bought to replace the one lost in the storm. The animal nickered softly, and she fed it an apple, taking comfort in its simple acceptance. "Planning to run?" She spun to find Jonah emerging from shadows. Her heart leaped. Joy, surprise, something deeper she didn't care to name. He looked exactly as she remembered, lean, watchful, comfortable in his own skin in a way town men never managed. "What are you doing here?" The question came out breathless. "Supply run. Heard there was a nurse in town causing a stir." His eyes took in her borrowed dress, her pinned hair. Looking respectable, Miss Whitmore. Feeling ridiculous, she admitted. "Like I'm wearing a costume. Town life does that, makes you feel like you're playing a part in someone else's story." He moved closer, and she caught the scent of leather and wood smoke that had meant safety in the mountains. "How long are you staying?" "I don't know. There's need here, but—" She gestured helplessly. "They want me to be something I'm not, a proper lady who knows her place. And what place is that? Teaching school, pouring tea, certainly not riding alone through blizzards or treating minors who might be outlaws." The bitterness surprised her. "Did you know your reputation has somehow tainted mine? The ladies whisper about our time together like it's a scandal novel." His jaw tightened. "I'm sorry for that. Should have taken you straight to town. Let someone respectable." "Don't!" She touched his arm, felt muscle tense beneath the cloth. "Don't apologize for saving my life, for treating me like a capable person instead of fragile goods." They stood close in the dim stable, horses shifting quietly in their stalls. The space between them hummed with possibility, with words unsaid and choices unmade. "There's something else," Jonah said finally. "Heard from a trapper that the Garrison gang is moving through the territory. The ones who hit your caravan. They're bold, hitting closer to towns." Fear touched her spine, but anger followed quickly. Those men had killed Samuel, had left her to die. The law? What law? Sheriff here has 2 deputies in jurisdiction that ends at the town limits. He paused, choosing words carefully. "Might be safer if you moved on. Head back east, maybe, until they're dealt with." "You mean until you deal with them?" He didn't deny it. This was who he was, the man who hunted those the law couldn't or wouldn't touch. The killer, some said. The protector, said others. Both, Eliza suspected, and neither label complete. "I won't be driven off by fear," she said. "Not by them, not by gossips, not by doctors who think credentials matter more than healing." Stubborn woman. But he said it with something like admiration. "What will you do?" "What I always do, what needs doing." She met his eyes, saw her own reflection there. "Though I'm tired of doing it alone." The words hung between them, invitation and question combined. His hand lifted, almost touched her face, then dropped. "Eliza, Miss Whitmore, Doctor." Thornton's voice cut through the moment. He stood in the stable entrance, taking in the scene with sharp eyes. "Mrs. Hartwell is concerned. It's hardly proper. Meeting men in stables after dark." "Hardly proper," Eliza repeated, feeling wild laughter bubble up. "No, I suppose it isn't." She looked at Jonah, at Thornton, at the choices they represented, safety and reputation, or freedom and uncertain partnership. "Thank you for your concern, Doctor," she said formally. "Mr. Reed was just informing me of potential dangers in the territory. I'll return to the Hartwells shortly." Thornton lingered, clearly wanting to say more, but finally retreated. When his footsteps faded, Jonah spoke quietly. "He's interested in you. He's interested in reforming me into a proper assistant for his proper practice. Might be a good life, safe, respectable. Might be." She studied his face, reading nothing but careful neutrality. "Is that what you think I should do?" "I think," he said slowly, "that you need to decide what you want, not what others expect, not what's proper or safe. What you want. And if what I want isn't in any town," his breath caught, just slightly, "then you know where to find it." He touched his hat, formal as any gentleman, and walked away. But at the door he paused. "I'll be at Murphy's trading post for 2 days, getting supplies. After that," he shrugged. "Mountains are big. Might be hard to find me." The message was clear. Choose now, or lose the chance. Eliza stood alone in the stable, torn between worlds. Outside, Millfield offered safety, respectability, a place in society's structure. Doctor, Thornton would court her properly. She'd pour tea and perhaps help with his practice in approved ways. She'd never again wake to gunfire or struggle through blizzards. Never again feel fully alive. Or she could choose the uncertain path. Follow a man who killed when necessary and saved when possible. Face danger and judgment. Trade comfort for freedom. Risk her heart on someone who might never speak of love but showed it in every careful stitch, every protective gesture. The horse nudged her shoulder, seeking another apple. She stroked its neck, remembering another horse holding steady while she cut a rope over a cliff. Remembering hands gentle on her wounds and eyes that saw her truly. "What do I want?" she whispered to the patient animal. But she knew, had known since she'd woken in a cabin that smelled of wood smoke and safety. The question wasn't what she wanted, but whether she had courage to claim it. Outside, Millfield beckoned with its lights and propriety. Inside, her heart pulled toward mountains and a man who asked nothing but offered everything. 2 days. She had 2 days to choose between the life others wanted for her and the life she wanted for herself. 2 days to decide if the traveling nurse's journey led to a proper ending or a wild beginning. The horse whickered softly, and Eliza made her choice. The morning Eliza left Millfield, Mrs. Hartwell stood on her porch, lips pursed in disapproval. "You're making a terrible mistake, my dear. That man will only bring you ruin." Perhaps. Eliza adjusted her saddlebags, medical supplies carefully balanced with provisions for the journey. "But it will be my ruin to choose." She'd left a note for Dr. Thornton, politely declining his offer of employment and Eastern connections. Let him find another assistant to mold into respectability. She had promises to keep and a life to claim. Murphy's trading post sat at a crossroads 5 miles from town, a rough building that served trappers, miners, and those who preferred commerce without society's scrutiny. Eliza found Jonah loading his pack horse, movements efficient as always. He looked up at her approach, and something flickered in his gray eyes. Surprise, hope, carefully controlled joy. "Decided to see more of the territory?" His tone was casual, but she caught the underlying question. "Decided I'm tired of being told what's proper." She dismounted, standing before him in her practical clothes, hair braided for travel. "There's a cholera outbreak reported near Fort Bridger. They need medical help. That's a hard ride, 2 weeks through rough country." "I know." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "We'll need more supplies. Murphy's got preserved vegetables that might help with cholera treatment." "We?" Such a simple word, but it sang in her heart. No questions about propriety, no attempts to dissuade her, just practical acceptance and partnership. They rode out before noon, leaving Millfield's judgment behind. The landscape opened before them, rolling hills giving way to badlands, red rock formations rising like ancient monuments. This was the West that called to restless souls, vast and unforgiving but honest in its dangers. The first days passed in comfortable routine. They rode steadily, but not hurriedly, making camp in sheltered spots Jonah knew from years of wandering. He hunted while she gathered medicinal plants, building her supplies from nature's pharmacy. Evenings were spent by the fire, sharing stories or comfortable silence. "Why Fort Bridger?" he asked one night, poking at the coals with a stick. "Because people are dying and I can help." She paused, then added honestly, "And because it's far from anyone who thinks they know what's best for me." "Running away?" "Running toward." She corrected. "There's a difference." He smiled slightly. "That there is." On the 4th day, the landscape changed. They entered true desert, where water became precious and shade scarcer than gold. The heat was different from winter's cold, but equally dangerous, a burning presence that sucked moisture from skin and strength from muscles. "Drink," Jonah reminded her frequently, passing his water skin. "Desert will kill you quiet. You don't feel the thirst until it's too late." She obeyed, trusting his expertise. That was the thing about traveling with him. She could release the constant vigilance that solo travel required. He watched for dangers, found water where none seemed possible, read the land like others read books, but the desert tested them. Their horses struggled in deep sand, and progress slowed. What should have been 2 days crossing stretched to 3. Water ran low despite careful rationing. "There's a spring," Jonah said on the 3rd evening, studying distant rocks. "Apache showed it to me years back. Question is whether we can reach it before." He didn't finish, but Eliza understood. Before their strength gave out, before the horses collapsed, before the desert claimed 2 more victims, they pushed on through the night, using stars for guidance and hope for fuel. Eliza dozed in the saddle, trusting her horse to follow Jonah's lead. Dawn came pale and merciless, revealing a landscape that wavered in heat haze despite the early hour. Then, miracle or skill green appeared. A cluster of cottonwoods marked the promised spring. The horses smelled water and hurried forward, all exhaustion forgotten. Eliza nearly fell from the saddle in her haste to reach the pool of clear water sheltered by rocks. Slowly, Jonah cautioned, but his own hands shook as he filled their skins. Too much too fast will make you sick. They rested through the heat of the day, sheltered by the trees. Eliza lay in the shade, feeling life seep back into her body. When evening cooled the air, she found Jonah sitting apart, cleaning his rifle with mechanical precision. "You're troubled," she observed. He glanced at her, surprised by her perception. "Apache sign, 2 days old, war party, heading north. Will they attack?" "Unlikely. They're after military supplies, not travelers. But—" He set the rifle aside. "Things are changing out here. Treaties broken, promises forgotten. The tribes are angry, and rightfully so, going to get bloody before it's done. Then people will need healing more than ever. You can't heal everyone. Eliza can't save the world with bandages and good intentions." "No," she agreed. "But I can save the person in front of me. That has to be enough." He looked at her with something like wonder. "You really believe that?" "I have to. Otherwise, what's the point?" That night, as they camped at the desert's edge with mountains rising ahead, she woke to find him standing watch, silhouetted against stars. The sight stirred something deep, this guardian who asked nothing but gave protection as naturally as breathing. "Can't sleep?" she asked, joining him. "Habit. Someone needs to watch. Not always. Not forever." He turned to study her in the starlight. "What are you saying?" Her heart hammered, but she'd crossed deserts for this courage. "I'm saying that maybe it's time you stopped watching alone. Time we both stopped running toward or away and just stayed." The silence stretched, filled with cricket song and distant coyote calls. Then his hand found hers, calloused fingers gentle as they interlaced. "You know what you're choosing?" His voice was rough. "Life with me won't be easy. No proper house, no society gatherings. Just this." He gestured at the vast darkness. "Movement and danger and freedom. And partnership," she added. "And purpose. And someone who sees me as I am, not as they think I should be." He pulled her against him then, her back to his chest, his arms encircling her. They stood that way, watching stars wheel overhead, feeling the immense world around them and the small, perfect space they carved from it. "When I found you in that snow," he said quietly, "I thought I was saving a life, didn't realize I was saving my own." She turned in his arms, reached up to touch his weathered face. We saved each other. The kiss was inevitable as sunrise, slow, deep, carrying promises too profound for words. When they parted, she saw her future in his eyes. Not the safe, prescribed path of town life, but something wilder and truer. They reached the mountains 2 days later, climbing through passes where snow still lingered in shadows. The cholera outbreak was worse than reported. Fort Bridger overwhelmed with sick soldiers and travelers. Eliza plunged into the work, setting up treatment stations, teaching basic sanitation, fighting death with knowledge and determination. Jonah helped without question hauling water, building isolation shelters, standing guard when desperate people tried to steal medical supplies. He became her partner in healing as he'd been in travel, 2 parts of something stronger than either alone. "You're good together," observed Maria Santos, a Mexican woman who'd been nursing the sick before Eliza arrived. "He looks at you like you hung the stars. He saved my life." "No, mija, you saved each other. That's rarer and worth more." The outbreak took 3 weeks to contain. They lost 20 souls despite their efforts. Each one a weight Eliza carried, but they saved over 100, and that had to balance the scales. Their last night at the fort, a soldier brought her a letter. "From back east, ma'am. Been chasing you for months." The letter bore her aunt's handwriting, her only remaining family. A prim Boston lady who disapproved of Eliza's choices. She opened it, expecting remonstrance, finding instead news that changed everything. "What is it?" Jonah asked, seeing her face. "My uncle died, left me inheritance, enough to buy supplies, maybe build a proper clinic somewhere." She looked up at him. "Enough to stop wandering, if I wanted. Do you want?" She considered it. Money meant choices. She could establish herself properly, become the respectable healer society might accept, build something permanent and safe. I want, she said slowly, to go where need takes us, to heal those others won't reach. To wake up beside you, whether that's in a mansion or under stars. She folded the letter. The money just means we can buy better supplies. His smile was answer enough. That night in their tent, with recovered patients celebrating outside, they made love for the first time. Not with the desperate passion of those who might lose each other, but with the deep certainty of those who'd chosen a shared path. No regrets? He asked afterward, her head on his chest, his fingers tangled in her hair. None. You. Only that it took so long to find you. They left Fort Bridger as they'd arrived, together, laden with purpose, heading toward the next crisis. But something fundamental had changed. They were no longer two people traveling in the same direction. They were partners, lovers, healers of different kinds united in common cause. The desert stretched ahead, then more mountains, more towns, more people needing what they offered. It would be hard life, dangerous and uncertain. Society would never approve. Proper people would whisper behind their backs. But under the vast western sky, with her chosen partner beside her and medicine in her bags, Eliza had never felt more free. The traveling nurse was no longer alone, no longer running. She'd found her place in the world, not in any building or town, but in the journey itself, in the work that called her, in the man who'd taught her that desire meant more than just survival. It meant choosing life on her own terms, and that was worth every scorching day and frozen night that lay ahead. The gold camp at Devil's Creek had changed in the months since Eliza's last visit. Where once desperate men had scratched at reluctant earth, now a small community thrived. Proper buildings replaced canvas tents, and she spotted several women among the miners, wives who'd followed their men into the wilderness, bringing civilization's touch to rough edges. Miss Whitmore, young Sally Henderson, whose father Eliza had saved from fever, ran to greet them. You came back, and you brought... Her eyes went wide, seeing Jonah, whose reputation preceded him even here. Mr. Reed is my partner, Eliza said simply, watching the child process this information. We're the sick, Sally. Your letter said urgent need. The cave-in. Sally's face sobered. 3 days ago, got most out, but some are hurt bad. Doc Martinez from the Mexican camp is doing what he can, but... They followed her to a building serving as makeshift hospital. Inside, chaos reigned. Men lay on cots, some moaning, others ominously quiet. A harried older man, presumably Doc Martinez, moved between patients with the exhausted determination of someone overwhelmed. Thank God, he said, seeing Eliza. Infected wounds, broken bones, one with lung damage from the dust. Too much for one pair of hands. She was already moving, assessing patients with practiced efficiency. Jonah, I need hot water. All you can manage. Sally, gather anyone who can help. We need bandages torn, instruments cleaned. She turned to Martinez. Show me the worst cases. What followed was controlled battle against death. Eliza worked with focused intensity, cleaning wounds gone septic, setting bones, fighting infection with her dwindling supply of carbolic acid. Jonah became her second hands, anticipating needs, holding men still during painful procedures, his strength channeled into healing rather than harm. This one's bad, Martinez indicated a younger miner, barely 18, chest crushed, breathing wet. Nothing more I can do. Eliza examined the boy. Tommy Morrison. Someone whispered. Come west seeking fortune to send home to his widowed mother. His breathing was labored. Bloody foam on his lips. Internal injuries. Likely fatal without surgery. She couldn't perform here. Laudanum for the pain, she instructed, knowing it was all she could offer. Keep him comfortable. No. Jonah's voice cut through. There's something else. Shoshone remedy. Helps clear the lungs. He was already moving to his pack, pulling out dried plants she didn't recognize. Learned it from their healers. Might buy time. She watched him prepare the mixture with surprising delicacy. The same hands that could draw and fire in heartbeats, now measuring medicine with careful precision. The boy's breathing eased slightly after the first dose. "It's not a cure," Jonah warned, "but might give him fighting chance." They worked through the night, side by side, when exhaustion threatened. They traded off, one resting while the other maintained vigilance. By dawn, they'd lost one man but saved 5 who'd seemed doomed. Tommy Morrison still breathed. Color better. The wet rattle in his chest diminished. "You did it." Martinez collapsed in a chair. "Aged 10 years in one night. Both of you. Never seen anything like it." But their relief was short-lived. Riders appeared at sunrise. Hard men with harder faces, led by someone Eliza recognized with cold dread. Jake Morrison's brother, Frank, head of the garrison gang that had attacked her caravan. His eyes found her immediately. Smiled with predator recognition. Well, the nurse who wouldn't die." He dismounted casually, hand resting on his pistol. "Boys said you were probably frozen in some drift. Glad to see your hearty stock." "What do you want, Morrison?" The camp foreman, Edwards, stepped forward nervously. These men were technically customers, buying supplies with gold of questionable origin. But everyone knew their true nature. Supplies, ammunition, the usual. Frank's eyes never left Eliza. "And maybe some medical attention. My boys got scratched up in a disagreement with some unfriendly parties." "I don't treat murderers," Eliza said flatly. His smile widened. "Now that's not very charitable. Thought healers helped everyone." His gaze shifted to Jonah, who'd materialized silently beside her. "Reed, should have known you'd be sniffing around. Still playing hero?" "Still breathing," Jonah replied evenly, which is more than Jake can say. Tension crackled. Hands drifted toward weapons. The injured miners, those who could, reached for whatever might serve as arms. This could explode into bloodshed with one wrong word. "Gentlemen," Doc Martinez stepped between them, voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. "This is a hospital. Men are healing here. Whatever grievances exist, settle them elsewhere." "The doc's right," Edwards added quickly. "Morrison, we'll fill your supply list, but then you move on. We want no trouble here." Frank considered, then laughed. "Fair enough. We're not animals. After all, just businessmen." He looked at Eliza again. "But I'm curious. Nurse, you cost me good men, stirring up trouble with your survival. Maybe you owe compensation. I owe you nothing." Her voice stayed steady, though her heart raced. "Your men left me to die. Any debt was paid in that snow." Interesting perspective. He turned to his gang. "Set up camp outside town. We'll conclude business tomorrow." To Jonah, he added, "This isn't over. Reed, Jake's death demands accounting. Any time you're ready to collect." Jonah said quietly. After they left, the camp exhaled collectively. But Eliza knew this was merely postponement. The garrison gang wouldn't leave without blood. "They'll attack," Jonah said that night, standing watch while she checked patients. "Frank's too proud to let the challenge pass. Then we prepare." She finished rebandaging Tommy's chest, pleased to find improvement. "These people helped me. I won't abandon them." "Never thought you would." He touched her shoulder briefly. "But preparation means accepting violence might be necessary." "Can you do that?" She thought of Samuel dead in his wagon seat, of the casual cruelty that had left her to freeze. To protect innocents? Yes. They spent the next day fortifying. Jonah organized the miners capable of fighting, setting watches, planning defensive positions. Eliza prepared for casualties, boiling instruments, tearing bandages, praying they wouldn't be needed. The women and children were gathered in the most defensible building. Night fell with electric tension. Then, just past midnight, it came, riders thundering in, guns blazing, but they met prepared resistance instead of sleeping victims. Miners fired from windows and rooftops, driving the initial charge back. "The hospital!" someone shouted. Eliza turned to see flames licking at the building's side, a diversion to draw defenders while the gang torched the wounded. She ran without thinking, bucket brigade forming behind her. The injured who could walk helped those who couldn't evacuate. Smoke filled the air. Chaos reigned, but they managed to empty the building before it was fully engulfed. Through the melee, she saw Jonah moving like deadly wind, rifles speaking with terrible precision. He fought not with rage, but cold efficiency, protecting rather than pursuing. When Frank Morrison tried to flank the defenders, Jonah was there. When gang members threatened the building holding families, Jonah drove them back. Then, disaster. A stray bullet caught Jonah's shoulder, spinning him down. Eliza saw him fall, her world narrowing to that single point. She abandoned her post, running through crossfire to reach him. "Just a graze," he gritted out, but blood soaked his shirt. "Quiet." She worked frantically, packing the wound, binding it tight. Around them, the battle raged, but her focus narrowed to keeping pressure on the injury, willing the bleeding to stop. "Behind you!" Jonah shoved her aside as Frank Morrison appeared. Gun aimed. The shot went wide. And then Tommy Morrison, the boy they'd saved, was there with a pickaxe, swinging with desperate strength. Frank went down hard. The gang, seeing their leader fall, broke and ran. The attack was over, leaving smoke and wounded and the acrid taste of gunpowder, but they'd held. The camp survived. "Let me see." Doc Martinez appeared as Eliza helped Jonah to shelter. Together they properly cleaned and dressed his wound. The bullet had passed through cleanly, missing anything vital. "You'll live," Martinez pronounced, "though you'll be sore for weeks." "Worth it," Jonah managed, eyes on Eliza. "You ran through gunfire for me. You do the same." "Already did. Guess that makes us even again." Dawn revealed the cost: 3 defenders dead, 7 wounded, the hospital burned. But the garrison gang was broken. Frank and 4 others dead, the rest scattered. The camp would rebuild, stronger for having survived. "You saved us." Edwards gripped Eliza's hand. "Both of you. We owe more than we can repay." "Just rebuild the hospital," she said tiredly. "Make it better. Stone walls this time. Proper ventilation. I'll send medical supplies when I can." They stayed a week, until Jonah could ride and the worst wounded were stable. The camp insisted on payment, not coins, but promises. "Come back when you can. You'll always have a home here. Remember us." Their last morning, Tommy Morrison approached shyly. "Ma'am, Mr. Reed, I wanted to thank you for saving my life twice over." "Thank yourself," Jonah told him. "You swung that pickaxe when it counted. I'm going home." Tommy continued. "Back to my mother. This isn't the life I thought it was." "Good choice," Eliza approved. "Give her our regards." As they rode out, the entire camp gathered to see them off. Men who'd faced death together. Women who'd fought fires. Children who'd huddled in darkness, all united in survival and gratitude. "We did good here," Eliza said as Devil's Creek disappeared behind them. "We did necessary," Jonah corrected, then winced as his shoulder pulled. "Which is sometimes the same thing." She reached over, took his hand. "Where now?" "Wherever you want. Wherever we're needed. Then forward," she decided. "Always forward." They rode into the morning sun, partners tested by fire and blood, bound by more than love, by purpose, by choice, by the knowledge that together they could face whatever the frontier demanded. Behind them lay ashes and victory. Ahead stretched endless possibility. The traveling nurse had found her tracker. The lone wolf had found his pack. And in the vast wilderness between civilization and chaos, they carved out their own trail. Dangerous, uncertain, but undeniably theirs. Tommy Morrison would tell the story for years. The nurse who ran through bullets, and the tracker who could not miss, who came when needed and asked only that others do the same. It would grow in the telling, as stories do, but at its heart remained truth. Sometimes love wasn't soft words and gentle touches. Sometimes it was standing together against the darkness, bandaging wounds by firelight, and choosing the harder path because someone had to walk it. And sometimes, just sometimes, that was enough to tip the scales toward hope. Summer painted the mountains in shades of green and gold as Eliza and Jonah made their way back toward Laramie. 6 months had passed since Devil's Creek. 6 months of traveling together through territories both beautiful and brutal. They'd treated snake bites in Arizona, delivered babies in remote homesteads, fought typhoid in a railroad camp. Each challenge had deepened their partnership until they moved as one entity, her medical knowledge complementing his wilderness skills, creating something greater than either alone. "We need supplies," Eliza noted, checking their depleted stocks. "Laudanum's nearly gone, and we're down to the last of the carbolic acid. Laramie's 2 days north," Jonah replied, studying the horizon. "Though going back there might stir up old ghosts." Old ghosts indeed. Laramie was where she'd started that fateful journey, where proper society had tried to cage her. But it was also the best place to resupply and hear news of where their skills might be needed next. They approached the town at sunset, finding it larger than she remembered. The railroad had brought growth, new buildings, more people, the double-edged sword of progress cutting into wilderness. The hotel where she'd once stayed now boasted a second story. The main street showed actual cobblestones in places. Eliza Whitmore. She turned to find Mrs. Pemberton, the minister's wife who'd once clucked over her choice to travel alone. The woman's eyes went wide seeing Jonah beside her, taking in their trail-worn clothes, the easy way they stood together. "Mrs. Pemberton." Eliza nodded politely. "How is Laramie treating you?" "Well enough, though the changes. But where have you been? We heard you were killed in that terrible attack. As you can see, reports were exaggerated." Mrs. Pemberton's gaze flickered between them, clearly bursting with questions propriety wouldn't let her ask. "And Mr. Reed, your companion?" "My partner," Eliza said firmly. "In healing and in life." The woman's face went through several expressions before settling on scandalized disapproval. "I see. Well, I suppose the frontier makes its own rules." "It does," Jonah agreed pleasantly, "which is why we prefer it." After she huffed away, Eliza laughed. "That'll be all over town within an hour." Bothered? Relieved? Now we won't have to explain to everyone separately. They took rooms at a boarding house that asked no questions, then split up. Eliza to the general store for medical supplies, Jonah to gather news and ammunition. She was examining bottles of medicine when familiar voices made her freeze. "Told you she'd gone wild. Living with that tracker. No marriage. No shame at all. Dr. Thornton." She'd recognize that cultured tone anywhere. And his companion? Disappointing. Really, she had such potential. Mrs. Hartwell from Millfield. I offered her respectability, a place in proper society. Instead, she chose that life. "The wilderness claims some," Thornton replied. "Breaks them down until they're little better than the savages they treat. I've established quite a successful practice here. Could have been hers to share, if she'd shown sense." Eliza stepped around the shelf. "Dr. Thornton, Mrs. Hartwell. How fortunate to find you both here." They startled, Thornton recovering first. "Miss Whitmore, you're looking—" He paused, taking in her sun-darkened skin, the calluses on her hands, the strength in her bearing. "Well, I am well. Very well. In fact—" She selected her medicines with a deliberate calm. "I hear your practice thrives." "Indeed. Proper medicine, proper facilities. I've even secured hospital privileges." His tone held smug satisfaction. "The town council appreciates professional credentials. How nice for those who can afford your fees." She paid for her supplies, noting how the shopkeepers smiled at her with genuine warmth. "And those who can't? The church provides some charity care." "Mrs. Hartwell interjected. "For the deserving poor. Of course. Of course." Eliza gathered her purchases. "And the undeserving? The miners, the saloon girls, the Chinese railroad workers, the Mexican vaqueros. Who heals them? Those who choose to live outside society's boundaries can hardly expect—" Thornton began. "They can expect compassion." Eliza cut him off. They can expect that someone values their lives regardless of their choices or circumstances. That's what I provide. Doctor, not charity for the deserving, but healing for anyone who needs it. Noble words, he said coldly. But where does it lead? You, unmarried, wandering with a man of violent reputation, lowering yourself to treat criminals and worse. You could have been respectable. I could have been caged. She met his eyes steadily. Instead, I'm free, and I've saved more lives in 6 months than your proper practice manages in a year. Which of us serves medicine better? She left them speechless, emerging into evening air that felt cleaner for having spoken her truth. Jonah waited outside, leaning against a post with deceptive casualness. Trouble? Clarity, she corrected. Did you learn anything useful? Cholera outbreak in a Mormon settlement 3 days west. They're isolated, distrustful of Gentile help, but desperate enough they might accept you. Then we go west. They spent the evening preparing, but their plans changed when a commotion erupted near the saloon district. A crowd gathered around 2 figures supporting a third between them. Eliza pushed through, finding a young woman bleeding heavily from a knife wound to her abdomen. Started over a card game, someone explained. She tried to stop them fighting and, "Get her inside, quickly." Eliza was already assessing the damage. Bad, very bad. The kind of wound that killed slowly but surely without immediate intervention. They carried her to the boarding house, Eliza working frantically. The wound was deep, possibly touching vital organs. She needed to operate, but here, with what assistance? I can help. She looked up to find Jonah rolling up his sleeves. You've seen me work enough. Tell me what you need. This is beyond basic field medicine. Then teach me. She dies either way if we don't try. She looked at the girl, barely 20, pretty despite the paint and hard living. One of the undeserving Thornton would turn away, decided. Boil water. We need the instruments completely clean. And whiskey, lots of it. What followed was the hardest procedure she'd ever attempted, by lamplight, with Jonah as her assistant. She opened the wound further, found the bleeding vessel, tied it off with a silk thread. Her hands moved with precision born of necessity while he followed her instructions perfectly. Holding, cutting, swabbing blood so she could see. "You've done this before," she murmured, noting his steady hands. "Field surgery in the war, mostly amputations. This is different." Hours passed. The girl, Mary Sullivan. They learned, stayed unconscious through most of it. Whiskey and laudanum keeping her still. When Eliza finally closed the wound, exhaustion made her hands tremble. "Will she live?" Jonah asked quietly. "If infection doesn't set in, if the repair holds, if she's strong enough." She slumped against him, let his arms support her. If. They maintained vigil through the night. By dawn, Mary still breathed. Color better than any had right to expect. Word had spread, the nurse and tracker had performed a miracle, saving one of the saloon girls doctors wouldn't treat. "She's asking for you," the boarding house owner said around noon. Mary was awake, weak but lucid. They said, "You saved me. Why? I ain't nobody important." "You're somebody to someone," Eliza told her gently. "That's important enough." Tears leaked down the girl's face. "Got a daughter back in Ohio. Been sending money home for her keeping. If I died..." "But you didn't. Rest now. Heal. Your daughter needs you strong." When they finally emerged that evening, they found a crowd gathered. Not townspeople come to gawk, but others from the margins. Saloon workers, traveling people, those who existed outside respectable boundaries. They pressed money into Eliza's hands. Small amounts, but meaningful from those who had little. "For your supplies," one woman explained. "So you can keep doing what you do. We take care of our own," added a Mexican vaquero. "You've shown you're one of us." Dr. Thornton stood at the crowd's edge, face twisted with something between envy and disdain. "Quite the spectacle," he said as the crowd dispersed. "Though I wonder if your patient will thank you when she wakes to find herself still living this life." She'll wake to find herself living. Jonah said flatly. That's more than your medicine offered. We'll see how long your partnership lasts when the novelty wears off. Thornton replied, when she realizes what she sacrificed for this wandering existence. Eliza stepped close to Jonah, took his hand publicly, felt his fingers interlock with hers. I've sacrificed nothing. I've gained everything. A partner who sees my worth beyond propriety. Purpose that transcends social boundaries. Freedom to heal without asking permission or checking bank accounts first. She looked at the crowd dispersing back to their lives. You talk about sacrifice, doctor, but what have you sacrificed? When did you last risk anything for a patient? When did you last push beyond what was comfortable or profitable? I maintain professional standards. You maintain profitable standards. There's a difference. She turned to Jonah. The Mormon settlement can wait one more day. Mary needs watching. They left Thornton standing alone on the boardwalk, representing everything they'd rejected. The next morning, with Mary stable and improving, they rode west toward new challenges. The town talk would follow them, the proper nurse gone wild, the dangerous tracker gone soft, the scandal of their unwedded partnership. Let them talk, out here, under endless sky. What mattered was the next person needing help, the next crisis requiring their combined skills. They'd found something rarer than social approval, a partnership of equals, a purpose worth pursuing, a love that thrived on freedom rather than constraint. The sun climbed high, painting their shadows long across the trail. Behind them, Laramie faded into memory. Ahead, mountains beckoned with promise of lives to save and choices to make. Eliza had started this journey as a traveling nurse, alone and determined. She continued it as half of something stronger, still a healer, but no longer alone, no longer uncertain of her place in the world. Her place was wherever need called, beside the man who'd taught her that desire meant choosing how to live rather than accepting what others chose for you. The frontier was vast, often cruel, always challenging, but it was also honest in its demands and generous to those who met them with courage. No regrets? Jonah asked as they paused to water the horses. She thought of Mrs. Hartwell's comfortable house, Dr. Thornton's successful practice, the cage of respectability she'd escaped, then looked at her scarred hands, capable of miracles, at her partner, dangerous and gentle in equal measure, at the wide world waiting for their help. None, she said, and meant it. Forward? Always forward. He agreed. They mounted up, riding toward the horizon where sky met earth in endless possibility. Somewhere ahead, people needed healing. Somewhere ahead, their combined skills would tip scales between life and death. Somewhere ahead lay the rest of their story, unwritten but certain to be worth telling. The traveling nurse had been left to die. Instead, she'd learned to live, and in choosing life on her own terms, she'd found more than survival. She'd found home in movement, purpose in service, and love in the most unexpected place, the heart of a lone tracker who'd needed healing as much as any patient she'd ever treated. The frontier had tried to break her. Instead, it had forged her into something stronger, not just a healer, but a force of nature in her own right, partnership with another such force. Together, they rode into their future, leaving respectability behind and finding something infinitely more valuable: freedom, purpose, and each other. Thank you for listening to this Wild West love story. Where are you enjoying this tale? Perhaps during your commute, at home, or somewhere unexpected. Please subscribe to the From Wild West channel and share your thoughts about Eliza and Jonah's journey in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you.